Kia ora, g'day, welcome back. Now, I did a live reaction to this a little while ago, not that long ago, as well as the replay of John Chapman's actions under the ISR footage where two of his acts during that entire event or this contact, he earned the Medal of Honor twice, or two Medal of Honors, basically. This here, I've seen this interview that Britt does. I've since done a part 2 reaction on the Antihero podcast and gotten a little bit more context about this guy, Britt Slimbinski. Slimbinski is what I refer to him as in the Antihero podcast too, after what I heard and stuff about there. So I'm coming back to this interview to do a reaction, specific separate reaction to this video, because even when I did the first live reaction to this, I was saying that he seemed off in some of his comments. And so I'll probably repeat myself with some of that, but I'm going to delve back into this reaction because it's just played on my mind. Like, it's quite annoying, this guy. And the more that I think about it, the more that this twat just annoys me. The fact that he's got this prominent display in the Medal of Honor Museum in recognition of some absolute warriors and heroes. Why he's in there, I don't know. But anyway, let's hit play and jump into this one.
Now, you're aware that there's this new drone video that's been looked at, and the Air Force believes that Chapman survived and that he had to fight and that he was alive.
The Air Force believed Chapman survived because he did survive, and he did continue to fight for Lincoln ages on his own because he got left behind by this twat.
And you also are aware that there's been criticism that you left him behind. How do you respond to that?
Well, I can tell you, we left no one behind. No one, right?
And the more he says that, the more, I don't know what footage he's been looking at, but how he manages to convince himself, even however long after the fact, sitting here looking at this lady, not necessarily looking her right in the eyes right now, on where I've just paused the video, but how he thinks that nobody can see that he left John Chapman and Neil Roberts behind up on Roberts Ridge is beyond me. Like, this guy just must not be all there.
What I saw, what I experienced, I know that clearly.
You don't know that clearly, you twat. You bloody left him behind. The footage shows it. So how you can sit there, and I spoke about in the live, trying to give the benefit of the doubt and acknowledging around what I saw, what I experienced, my observation, whatever, the words that he uses. Like, yeah, it's hard to argue with that, when somebody's been on the ground, which he has. Respect to him for that. And unless you were on the ground right there next to him, it's hard for anybody to challenge that. But in this case, what's unique about it, and the reason why I think it can be challenged and should be looked at, is because the ISR footage shows what he did and didn't do. And he clearly left John Chapman and Neil Roberts behind from that bunker one and the footage and stuff there. Maybe I'll do a separate reaction to that, but maybe not. I included, when I did the live reaction to this video and to the John Chapman one. So anyway, let's crack on with this.
But we didn't leave anyone behind up there. I wasn't more than 20, 30 feet away from where John was.
Yes, you did, bro. You left him behind, and you were behind him, particularly on that first assault on Bunker 1.
And that was my experience. What I want people to focus on is that, it's called Roberts Ridge now because we lost, right? 6.
You want people to focus on something else and focus on the name Roberts Ridge because you lost 6 others, or 7 lives total, I think. Because you don't want to be facing the questions about you leaving John Chapman behind, about the fact that you've been awarded a Medal of Honor for basically being the guy following John Chapman, who assaulted Bunker 1 on his own, who took out the enemy Taliban, and then when it was safe, then you came forward to where he was. And then John Chapman exposed himself nearing the end of that footage in order to save as many lives as he could, especially once that other helicopter got hit and made a hard landing into the area. Sadly, 5 more lives would be lost as they were exiting from what I could see on the footage. But a total of 23 lives were saved as a result of John Chapman's actions, not as a result of yours. Slime Binsky is what I'll refer to him as. That may be too harsh. Again, I acknowledge I wasn't on the ground. Massive respect to him and his men that went there. Why I call him that is because of what I've seen in the Antihero podcast. He sits on the board for the Medal of Honor Museum, and he's given himself a prominent display in that museum. And John Chapman don't get me wrong, he's got a permanent position in the museum itself, but it looks so small in comparison to what old Slimebag here has given himself in terms of his display. And the communication that was lost with John Chapman's wife when all the preparation leading up to and talking about having a display there for him, which they should have, which was going well. And then all of a sudden the communications with her just stopped. And then lo and behold, there's a prominent display of this ball bag instead of John Chapman. And when you can see the footage, when you watch the footage, it's pretty clear to see whether you are an army person or not, or military person or not. It's pretty clear by watching that who should be awarded America's highest military recognition or medal, which is the Medal of Honor, and who shouldn't. And from what I saw in there, John Chapman absolutely should be getting awarded it twice. And this guy and other members of his team, whoever the guy was up on top of Bunker 1 for a period of time with the modified M60, I think they said, firing away, and then he got hit by some frag and tumbled down the side of the thing, but was still alive, badly injured, I think, from what I understand. But even the narrator on that mentioned it wasn't this guy. He was there, but he was down the bottom, and it was one of his other team members, one of his other SEAL members that got fragged and hits and come tumbling down the side, and then they withdrew. So that guy should get some sort of recognition, maybe a Medal of Gallantry or whatever the other types of medals that they have for that. Probably not the Medal of Honor because, like I said, John Chapman from that ISR footage is the guy who clearly deserves the Medal of Honor twice. This guy getting a Medal of Honor for following behind, I don't know what the justification is. I think the US, and I mentioned in the Antihero podcast part 2 reaction, I think the US and the military has done themselves a disservice and diminished the integrity and the requirements of the Medal of Honor by awarding this guy one. Not for others that have received one. That's not what I'm saying. And hopefully not for others that will receive one. I just don't agree. That's just my take as a Kiwi sitting here in New Zealand. Kiwi/Australian sitting here in New Zealand, adding in my 2 cents. I don't think this guy, based on what I saw in the ISR footage, I don't think anything of what he did there warrants him receiving a Medal of Honor or the highest award. I'm not jealous of it. I'm just upset that John Chapman doesn't have the prominent display, and that this guy sitting on the board, I would have fought tooth and nail to have his teammate John Chapman as the prominent display, and he take a smaller position, which is basically what he's done to John. He's given him a smaller position. He's got the prominent position. And in this interview, which you'll notice, I think he only mentioned John Chapman's name once. And the rest of the time, he doesn't acknowledge him or talk about him at all. Talks about these people, which rest in peace to these 7 people total that lost their lives, 7 including John Chapman. Avoids the question completely because what he wants people to recognize and remember is it's called Roberts Ridge. I don't think anybody's forgotten that. What they are upset about is you twat, Slime Binsky, for receiving a Medal of Honor, for first accepting the award, when I think you would, if we sat down and watched the ISR footage, I would love to hear him talk through how, where, and why he believes he should be and has earned the Medal of Honor. I think he would struggle, based on whatever the criteria is that the US has for it. Who looked at that video footage and recommended that this guy be awarded the Medal of Honor as well? And then who vetted the confirmation or the footage and the information to go, yep, this guy deserves one? I mean, if they're giving him one, why are they not giving all the SEAL team members that were part of that task and patrol a Medal of Honor? It just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, I'm rambling on because I'm got more context from the Antihero podcast, and I'm annoyed at this guy, Slime Binsky, for the way he comes across in here. I did mention in the live that I did the other night to this that he seemed off. I was probably less energetic, less passionate than what I am right now on the back end of doing part 2 of the reaction, like I said, to the Anti-Hero podcast.
Other people up there, total of 7, right? 7 Americans we lost up there. There were just as many severely wounded. Everyone at some level was impacted by this fight.
And at no time, you still haven't spoken about John and his courage, his valor, his bravery, the actions that he took. Like, again, absolute respect to those, sadly, that lost their lives. But what about the actions of your man, John Chapman, leading the charge, and then even at the very end, sacrificing himself, exposing himself fully to draw the fire of the enemy so that they didn't just focus in on that helicopter, big, fat, heavy target filled with 20 plus people in there. At no point in this interview do you acknowledge John or talk about his actions. It's pretty poor. And he sits here and talks about Scouts honor rubbish and bloody his leadership and integrity. Anyway, let's carry on.
So not a day goes by. I'm responsible for all these guys. A day goes by that I'm not thinking of that.
Well, you should be thinking of it a lot more, because if you're thinking about not a day goes by, you're responsible for those guys. Where was your responsibility to John Chapman and Neil Roberts? Why'd you leave them behind when you came down off the ridge? When you came down off that feature? And I did mention in the live, I think it was during the live there, that he may be talking about that they didn't leave anyone behind because I assume other rescue forces came in there and evacuated everybody else. And so maybe at that time, that's when Neil Roberts and John Chapman's bodies were recovered. So effectively and essentially, this Slime Binsky is still on the feature with other team members, although they've withdrawn. They left John and Neil behind from that area to pull right back to get out of that area, which is, I guess, to a degree in that context, fair enough. But he spoke about, he crawled over John, checked him for signs of life, and that there was nothing. Lo and behold, the next day, or later on, a few hours later, the fight is happening and old John Chapman's all by himself. The guy that Slime Binsky said had no signs of life. The guy that Slime Binsky said he crawled over and checked for signs of life and that there was none. The same Slime Binsky said he left no one behind, but at the same time, they then did withdraw and got out of that area and did, in fact, leave John Chapman and Neil Roberts behind. But if he's talking about in terms of the total, like once they finally got rescued and resources were put in there to get the people out, if that's what he's talking about in terms of they didn't leave anybody behind, then I guess from a technical viewpoint in that regard, he's right. They didn't leave anybody behind. If that's the case, I don't know and haven't seen any footage, and I haven't got into the parts of the interview in terms of how the full recovery happened. What I did hear was that Neil Roberts had been stripped of whatever gear he had on him, and John Chapman still had all his gear on him. So there must have been some type of battlefield clearance and stuff done to retrieve the bodies of all of those that sadly lost their lives, the 7, in that particular event or contact. So, yeah, this guy, man, is just slime bag. It's no wonder a lot of the comments, and when I received the request of this video, people expressing their disgust for you, bros.
So originally you said you had to land on the mountain. You had to go to the objective, but why did you have to land on the X? Didn't you break protocol by landing on the X, which is against protocol? Why did you do that?
So the original plan was to land. So as a leader, my job is to accomplish my mission with the least amount of risk to my force. To do that, I was going to land at another location.
Sounds very, is he in politics now? I think I shared this in the live reaction the other night. Sounds like he gives political answers, like even that first one. What I want people to remember is, just completely went away from her question around what do you say to that people feeling, upset about he left John Chapman and Neil Roberts behind, and then just deflecting that question and trying to shift it to something else. Sounds like he's doing something else here. Why did you land on the X? Why did you break protocol for them in terms of what they're doing? I get trying to give context. My job is to try to achieve the mission with minimal risk to his team, blah, blah, blah. I think people would understand that, like regardless of whether they're military background or not. But the question is pretty specific, so maybe just cut to the chase. Why did you land there in that particular area, as opposed to being off the X, the end state of target of where you want to get to, and moving or walking, in this case, onto the target. If they're going in to retrieve, from what I understand, Neil Roberts was already there on the ground. I could understand wanting to go straight in onto the X and trying to retrieve him as soon as they could from that perspective. However, again, subject to whatever the orders might be or that come through, then you look to plan and implement those orders as effectively as you can.
And then make my movement on foot to the top of the mountain. There were other changes that forced me to adapt my plan. That forced me.
And this is funny, when he's talking about this, there were other changes that forced me to adapt my plan. She goes on and asks what were those changes, and he says, I don't know.
to go to the top of the mountain.
And what were those changes?
Well, I wasn't aware of them. I was.
Well, there you go. Same thing. I don't know. I wasn't aware of them. So don't talk about there were other changes that forced me to change my plans. And then when asked what were those other changes, and then say, I wasn't aware of them. Like, that just doesn't make sense. Again, it was off-putting the first time when I listened to this guy. It's even more so just, as I watch this again. I'm interested to hear what other people think, probably more so particularly, well, from anybody, but particularly from those in the US and with a military background in particular. Be interesting to hear your thoughts. Maybe very different to mine. Maybe you think he's this blinking hero, legend guy who deserves the Medal of Honor. Like I said, I'm sitting here in my armchair, very easy for me to sit back and go, no, I don't think he does, in comparison to what John Chapman did, and or based on my limited understanding of what a Medal of Honor, the requirements to receive such an award would entail. And I didn't see him do anything other than just do his job, like being a normal member of a team, doing their job in a very chaotic environment. But the actions of one person, in this case, John Chapman, the actions of one person stood out so supremely and so much higher and above anybody else, including this ball bag, that I just don't see how, where, or why Slime Binsky here gets a Medal of Honor and gets his own prominent display, and John Chapman doesn't get that prominent display. Like, it may seem like a real trivial thing, but I think it's important. I think it's worth raising. I think it's worth the family just continuing to badger this museum and go, what the truck is going on? Like, this isn't right. This guy can't even, and in the Antihero podcast, this guy doesn't even acknowledge John Chapman and his actions and everything that he did in his display. He acknowledges the 7 dead operators that lost their lives, including John, and he refers to them, names them all just by their first name only. If he's been awarded a Medal of Honor, like they talk about in the Antihero podcast for that same event, and John Chapman has, you would think that him as a survivor would be doing everything in his power to talk about John Chapman's courage, his bravery, his valor, everything that he did, and just constantly reminding people about that rather than focusing in on him, and which is what he does, which is what Slimebag here does in this interview. Maybe that's just how he's wired, eh? Him, me, and forget about the actual hero and the person who deserved the Medal of Honor not once but twice, which is John Chapman.
I was told I needed to be in position by sunup, and that's what I did.
So you just lied and made up that there were some other things that you were made aware of that forced you to change your plans to land on the X versus not landing on the X and walking onto target. Then when asked about what were they, I wasn't made aware of them. I don't know what they were. So,
making it, going back to, if I could make that decision point for you, making that decision to go back. And
what the hell is that? So, so if I could make that decision for you going back, like you're trying to baffle her with, or trying to bamboozle her, I think, and or listeners to this with your mumblings. Like, it doesn't make sense, bro.
So I have all those tactical thoughts running through my mind. And then I'm certain at this point also that this is a one-way trip.
Bro, you were also certain that you didn't leave anybody behind. You were also certain that John Chapman didn't have any signs of life. Lo and behold, he's back to life and fighting again. Actually, I did talk about in the live reaction, it just comes back to memory now, that because it spoke about, the narrator was talking about in that footage, at this point, I think he said John Chapman's been hit twice and is now incapacitated or is presumed dead. So maybe he, those rounds hit him and he maybe got knocked back and maybe knocked his head, and maybe that put him out for a bit. So maybe in that context, maybe that is something that could have possibly happened to John Chapman, which may support Slime Binsky's story. I don't think it does, but which may possibly support Slime Binsky's story if he did actually go to John Chapman and check on him. But from the footage and what the narrator's talking about, there's no point where anybody from the remaining SEAL team that was alive, that was still in the fight or withdrawing, there's no point where there shows any footage of this guy or any of the other team members going to John to check on him to see if he was alive. So, yeah, anyway.
Like I said, superior force I'm going against. Odds are definitely not in my favor, but it is probably.
Again, just this guy's talking about him. It's not in my favor. Superior force. I'm in charge of these guys. They're my responsibility. No point is he talking about the courage or actions of John Chapman at all, who was the guy literally at the tip of that spear, leading the push and taking out Bunker 1, staying in the fight. Last man there left, alone, on his own, exposes himself. Prior to that, hand-to-hand combat, from what I recall and what we see in the ISR footage, or what they're talking about anyway, we can't really make it out, but it says hand-to-hand combat with at least 2 other insurgents that came there to try to take him out. And he took them out. But this guy just continues to talk about himself.
Neil's only chance. And I'm sorting all through this in my head, this thought.
I'm surprised that he even mentioned Neil Roberts, like that they are Neil's only chance. Cool. And he has got something on his display, apparently, where he talks about Neil Roberts as well, and has which is really nice, from what the Air Force guy says, that he has that acknowledgement for Neil Roberts, but he's got nothing for John Chapman. It's just crazy. Was this guy not like John Chapman beforehand? Did he just come to not like him because of his courage that he showed, and he just showed this guy up? Like, I don't understand. This guy just seems like a slime bag.
Is in the back of my mind. Very vividly remember it sitting there on that helicopter, and it's the Boy Scout oath. It's on my honor, I'll do my best. On my honor, I'll do my best. On my honor, I'll do my best.
Rubbish, your bloody Boy Scout oath. Can jam that up your backside, because looking at that footage, bruz, and then just having an understanding of your prominent display at this Medal of Honor museum, and the fact that, myself and a number of other comments that I've read don't think you should have that in the first place. Like the ISR footage, without even seeing the comments, and I looked at that ISR footage long beforehand, I didn't see anybody else, including this guy, do anything that warranted him being awarded the Medal of Honor. He wasn't dragging bodies or carrying anybody out. He wasn't assaulting first. He didn't do anything of what John Chapman did. He was constantly behind him. Even when John pushed, and he saw him pushing to go and assault that first bunker, he stayed back. Like, he stayed well and truly back until he must have known John Chapman has taken control of it and neutralized the enemy threat that was there. Then you see him move up. It's ridiculous to me. Why this twat has been issued a Medal of Honor. I would love to hear the rationale as to why, from him and or from other team members and or from the people that make the decision.
Repeatedly, that phrase. So I give the order to move out, crawling across the ground to send my wounded guy first, because it's going to take him the longest time to go. Then I crawl over to John, crawl over.
This is this I send my wounded guy first. Well, because he exposed himself too. If it's the guy that I'm thinking of, who then from the narration got fragged and he fell down the side of the thing, like, whoop-de-doo, you sent your wounded guy first. And then you're saying you went and checked on John, which is the part that he's getting up to. John must have been completely knocked out and had no pulse if this guy's gone over and done the check for signs of life and then deemed that he's got no signs of life, and then you've left him. You didn't try to drag him out, you left him there, which is just crazy to me.
The top of John, looking for some sign of life from him, and I didn't get any, no movement, no sound or anything from him. And then make the decision, we're going to continue on, relocate over the side of the mountain, which is just over the hill. It wasn't more than 20 feet, just to get out of the direct fire of them shooting straight at us.
Do you think that Chapman survived?
Well, it was.
He's thinking, oh, bloody hell, do I think he survived? The reason that I think he's hesitating is because he knows he didn't check on him. Like, that's my thought. He's saying that there's no sound and no signs of life, I think, were the words. Like, there's more to it than just sounds and physical signs. Like, you blink and you check for a pulse. It might be a weak one, but you still check for a pulse in terms of your medical training, which he and his team members would have received. He might not have been the patrol medic for his team, but I can almost guarantee that every member within a Special Forces team is going to have a level or a degree of trauma treatment and care in operations or out in the field. And so therefore a level of medical training for each operator. It's just one of those things. It's important. You know that the risks are high. Same way every operator is going to carry a tourniquet on them, a first aid kit. They're going to have, items on them because they know the importance that it may come in, that they may need to use it. And just seeing the long pause, and when this guy's about to answer now about John Chapman, I can't help but feel that it's because he knows he didn't check on him and he left him behind. Because he, didn't want to crawl. Like, lots of rounds coming in there, obviously heavy, accurate fire. That's a daunting thing. And, regardless of who you are. I can't sit here and say that I would have gone in and done it because I wasn't in that situation, So, again, credit to him and his team members that were there on the ground. But, man, just bloody, as hard as it may be, what is it? The Boy Scout oath? On your honor, you'll do your best. Blinking, how about on your honor, you'll tell the truth? Hey, on your honor, you'll do your best. On your honor, tell the truth with regards to what happened in this contact. And how about you bloody recognise John Chapman for the beast that he is, and the footage. No doubt you've watched it. Maybe you can't bring yourself to watch it because it highlights the fact that you can clearly see you don't deserve a Medal of Honor for your actions in that particular contact.
Wasn't what I experienced, wasn't what I saw. I can't get on my radio, change frequencies quick enough to talk to them, to tell them do not land on top before they get.
Did they pause or cut stuff out? Wasn't what I experienced, wasn't what I saw, to her question about John Chapman. Like, did he say more and then they edited it out or whatever? Like, it's just, I don't know. Seems like it faded out to something else or to this part where they are now. And maybe there was other stuff that was said that's been edited out.
They themselves had another RPG hit the engine, and then they crashed on top.
And why didn't you radio them beforehand so that they knew that you'd already had a helicopter hit there?
So in the situation that we were in, it was our radios had a limited range.
I spoke about this in the live as well. It just seems like he's trying to gather his thoughts and think quickly or trying to keep the conversation going. Yeah, radios have a limited range. The question was, why didn't you radio earlier, sooner to the other choppers? And I think I spoke about, or to the other chopper, to warn them. And I'm pretty sure I spoke about this in the live. Like, there's no denying there was obviously a lot of chaos happening in this particular event, contact where they were, troops in contact. And so to sit back, like either for this female journalist or for myself to sit back here and go, yeah, why didn't you do that? It's pretty easy to do that in hindsight from the comfort and luxury without the stress and chaos happening of what this guy and his other team members were facing. Very easy to sit there and look at that and go, bro, why don't you jump on the radio, warn the other chopper, don't come in here, blah, blah, blah. Or land somewhere else and then the troops walk in. Why didn't you do that? I'm not there on the ground, but I can only assume that there's a heck of a lot of moving parts. Neil Roberts is there. So far, they've failed. They haven't been able to retrieve him. Now, from what I'm guessing, he believes John Chapman is dead. And if you listen to and or believe his comments, you'd say that he believes that he is dead because he says he crawled over to him and was on top of him, checked him for signs of life, saw nothing, heard nothing. And then he's got another wounded mate who he's sending down the hill first to try to get out of the direct fire. And he's saying, we're only 20, 30 meters away. But you've left John Chapman behind, you've left Neil Roberts behind, etc., etc. And then talking about being asked a question around why didn't you radio earlier? I'm, maybe in his defense, maybe that's not the priority in his mind right there and then. Maybe his priority is, how do I survive? And how do I help? I'd like to think, how do I help the remaining members of my team stay alive? Maybe it's a decision that he made. Maybe he weighed it up and thought, well, Neil is already dead. We were coming here to try to get him. We've failed on that so far. I've just lost John Chapman. Or I believe I've lost John Chapman. I think he's dead. I'm not hearing anything from him. He's no longer fighting or shooting any rounds. So I make a decision to withdraw. One of my other guys has just been frayed. He comes tumbling down. He's injured, so I send him down first. I'm behind him. I believe John Chapman is dead. I didn't go over and check on him, though, but because I wasn't seeing anything, didn't hear anything, he wasn't engaging or shooting back, I made a call. Maybe if he just spoke with some honesty and or integrity, this is just my take. This is my version of what I think happened, right? But I think if he spoke that way, and trying to paint that picture, we were in survival mode as a leader. I was trying to get not only myself, but my troops out of there. Sadly, I believe that John Chapman had been killed, although I didn't have confirmation because I didn't go over and check on him, but I based it on, I didn't hear anything from him. I was yelling out to him. I got nothing back. I didn't see him moving and he wasn't firing or engaging, shooting any rounds back. So I believed, based on what I could see, that he was dead, but I didn't go over and physically check on him, because I felt that would have put me at too much risk to do that. And if I go over, then now potentially we are 2 patrol members down, 1 badly injured, and now potentially I might be a 4th casualty, or worse, I could be, I could end up dead as well, which is what I believe John Chapman was at that time. Does that make sense? I think in those moments that, I don't think there's anything wrong with if a person came out and spoke that way in terms of what they were seeing, feeling, hearing, tasting, touching, all that sort of stuff on the ground in the moment. I would sit there and listen to that version if that's what happened and go far out. Yeah. Who am I to say, oh, you should have gone in there and done this, done that? But when I've heard this guy talk about crawl over, being on top of, checking for signs of life, and then leaving him, if you're on top of him already, just start dragging that guy as best you can to get him down to where you were. But the footage shows, from what the narrator is talking about, that he doesn't. None of the SEAL team members go anywhere near John Chapman to check on whether or not he's alive. And I would have thought, if you are right there by one of your brothers, right on top of them, which this guy describes, checking him, there's no signs of life, regardless if there's no signs of life, you're thinking to yourself, I'm not leaving this fella here. We're going to have to try to come back to get to Neil Roberts, if they didn't go past him. But I'm right here on top of the bro right now. I'm not leaving this fella here. I'm dragging him as best I can, keeping myself down as low a profile as I can to get out of there. But I'm not leaving this guy behind. So if Slime Binsky was where he said he was, on top of John doing that stuff, he did leave him behind. He left him behind and wriggled and crawled his way out of there without him. That's my take.
On how far I could transmit on him.
I'm going to read you something that I'm sure you're familiar with because it's been published. This is from a transcript.
this part I'm going to skip forward, like the part there's probably further context. The transmission on the radios. So yeah, maybe that was the last thing on his mind, to radio in and say, hey, by the way, don't come and land here because there's a massive number of insurgents with RPGs, heavy machine guns, etc., etc. A large fighting force. That maybe that wasn't at the forefront of his mind. Maybe he was thinking, man, we need a chopper in here. Maybe having the chopper come in could also be an indication or a sign to potentially scare enemy combatants away, to withdraw and retreat, to thereby give that QRF force time to get onto the ground and then secure their mates and then get out of there, and or secure that position and look to hold it. Who knows? Maybe that's what was going through his head as well. Needless to say, I think there would have been a heck of a lot of chaos and a heck of a lot of stuff going through Slimbinski's mind, right or wrong. His inability to answer the question, at least in my opinion, my take, my observation, honestly, like, I don't know that. Well, I don't see myself or find myself believing what it is that Britt Slimbinski is saying, especially given everything in and around this whole Medal of Honor thing, and his display and him being on the board and his lack of any sort of acknowledgement of John Chapman. Like, that just really stands out to me the more I listen to this interview. And it's piss poor. Why he would ignore such a warrior like John Chapman in any interview just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, I'm going to skip forward past this reading that she does of the apparent taken out of context piece from the book.
Still actively engage in our forces that were only feet away from him. And that was just a small piece of the larger story. But I can tell you that 26 years of service, every day of it, I served with honor and integrity. Every day.
So you think
Yeah, whatever, mate.
this was taken out of context?
I know it was taken out of context.
And then
Even she looks like, even that look didn't look like she believes what it is that he's saying.
there was some criticism about a 2007 operation in Helmand where you're accused of sending Blue Squadron out to bring a head back on a platter. Did you do that?
Jennifer, every day, 26 years, honor and integrity.
Yeah, mate. Sending out Blue Squadron, I know nothing about that. That'd be interesting to hear. You'd probably need members from Blue Squadron to be speaking about that one. Maybe they have, or maybe it's just a war crime rumor that has been spread. Who knows? I don't know. But with regards to the ISR footage from Roberts Ridge, what John Chapman clearly did versus what this guy didn't do, what John Chapman rightly earned and has been recognised and has been awarded and should be awarded twice in regards to Medal of Honor, and what this guy didn't do but has been recognised and been awarded a Medal of Honor on that same piece of dirt, that same mud where the same blood was spilt. Yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see how, where, or why Britt Slimbinski should be receiving a Medal of Honor. If anything, and then again, the guy that got fragged and come down, like his wounded guy that he sent down first that he mentioned, like definitely some sort of Medal of Gallantry or Valor or something like that for that person. I don't know that gets a Medal of Honor, for that guy. This guy, definitely. I didn't see anything in the ISR footage that shows why he should be receiving a Medal of Honor. Maybe if it's I think they talk about it in the Anti-Hero podcast, maybe it's some sort of leadership award, like Distinguished Service Medal or Cross or whatever it is that it might be called, but some sort of medal for showing leadership in that space. Yeah, I could see why and where maybe he gets recognition for something like that. But the highest military honor in the US, Medal of Honor, for his role in that contact and event, I don't know. I don't see it. Unless people can point out to me in that ISR footage and explain to me how, where, and why Slimbinski here should receive the Medal of Honor, same as John Chapman, I'd be interested to hear it. But I don't, because I can't see it. Anyway, that's it for this video. That took, how long did that take? Probably an hour, 40 minutes. But appreciate your time. Thank you for stopping by. This down a little bit of a rabbit hole on the back end of the Antihero podcast and what they're talking about in particular with regards to John Chapman, rest in peace. Double Medal of Honor winner. And if he hasn't received it twice, he bloody well should have and should do. And this guy, who was the team leader, Britt Slimbinski, or Slimbinski, I'm calling him, just due to what I've seen of him so far, what I've heard about him, largely in this reaction, what I've seen him talking about himself and what he's done, fails to recognize John Chapman in any sort of significant way throughout this interview at all, unless Fox News edited out all the positive things that he may have been saying about John Chapman. Sitting there listening to him, listening to how he speaks in his body language, it doesn't seem to me that he's one to quickly sing the praises of John Chapman. And it seems like that would be evidence and proof of that through his display in the Medal of Honor Museum, whereby he doesn't recognize or acknowledge nothing on his prominent display to acknowledge John Chapman at all, which is just a sign of a negative sign of probably the type of character of this man, if you can call him that. Slime bag is what I'll call him, ball bag. So anyway, that's that. And I've got more reactions to do. So you look after yourselves, regardless of those challenges, difficulties, trials. Keep tuning up, stay in the fight, keep putting one foot in front of the other. Take one day at a time, be kinder to yourself. Know it's okay to not be okay, and that it's okay to ask for help. The sun will shine again. There are better days ahead, and they are always closer than you and I think. And there is always a light at the end of that tunnel. You just have to want things to get better and then make conscious, consistent efforts towards trying to get there, and things will happen. Starting up here with a thought of wanting things to get better. If you're going through some dark, hard times, miserable times right now, start thinking about how and where you want things to be in a more positive frame of mind. Sounds easier said than done. I know that, and through experience, it is definitely easier said than done, but it does happen and it does work. Not during our time schedule when we might want it to happen, but it does come to pass. So just keep chipping away and stick at it. Don't lose sight of your end goal and where you want to be. And I promise you, things will get better. As always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there is a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.